you're so cool, Brewster!
Welcome to the Store Geek Podcast, where your friendly neighborhood world film geek Albert Valentine talks about films made and released during the golden age of the VHS era.
Hey everyone, it's your friendly neighborhood world film geek Albert Valentine. Welcome to the latest episode of the Store Geek Podcast, where I talk about films from the 70s to the early noughts during the golden age of the home video era. Now, Halloween is going to be coming up in 10 days, and I'm really excited about this. It's probably my all-time favorite holiday, with Christmas in at a close second. So with that said, I figured let me go a little bit to the A-list today for this episode. I know I usually focus on smaller films, smaller scales films, and international films, but I figured for Halloween I'm going to do a little treat today because I'm going to talk about one of my all-time favorite 80s films, and that is a little film called Fright Night. This is the story of Charlie, who discovers that his new neighbor, Jerry Dandridge, is a vampire, and of course no one believes him. So he turns to a TV show host named Peter Vincent, who was once an actor in vampire films, with being totally oblivious that Peter's not exactly a vampire hunter. He was just an actor. And of course all hell starts to break loose. So we're gonna get right into the film, give a little bit of info on the cast and all that good stuff. So let's get right to Fright Night. So the film opens up with Charlie Brewster and his girlfriend Amy, played by William Ragsdale and Amanda Beers. They're having a little makeout session, although they were supposed to be studying, and they're both high school seniors. Charlie discovers one day that he's got a new neighbor who just moved in next door, but he doesn't meet him quite yet. Instead, he sees two guys dragging a coffin. He kind of rouses suspicions, but doesn't think about much. Of course, Amy's ticked off at him because they're supposed to be getting their groove on, and Amy finally decided she wants to lose her virginity to him, but he blows her off because of this whole coffin incident. But that's okay. So what happens is the next day, Charlie apologizes to Amy, and he hears about some strange stuff happens. But then when Charlie returns home from school, he notices this woman coming out of a car, and she goes to the new neighbor's house. So Charlie decides to think not much of it, but at school the next day, he learns that the woman has been found murdered. So he's now convinced something's going on with this new neighbor because obviously he was one of the last people to see her alive. And of course, as he's trying to explain, watching this on the news, and he was trying to make his apology to Amy for what happened the other night, Amy kind of gets pissed off and pretty much smashes a burger in his face, with Charlie's best buddy, Evil Ed, played by Stephen Jeffries, laughing in his face and giving probably one of the most iconic lines of the film. Oh, you're so cool, Brewster! So if you remember that, that's from the original film. Well, that night, Charlie's in his room and he notices a woman next door, and all of a sudden he finally meets the next door neighbor. And as he undresses her and he starts to kiss her, Charlie soon discovers the horrifying truth. His new neighbor is a vampire. Because just as the neighbor is about to bite this woman's neck, he busts Charlie. And all of a sudden he just draws the shade down, and that's the end of that. So what happens is, a day or two pass by, and Charlie ends up meeting the new neighbor after getting some advice from telling Evil Ed about his new neighbor being a vampire. And Evil Ed gives him all the warnings: garlic, holy water, stake through the heart. But one of the most important rules is do not invite a vampire to your house, with good reason. And of course, this little shtick will be later used in The Lost Boys 2 years later. So when Charlie returns home, he's looking for his mom, and his mom goes, "Charlie, I want you to meet someone." And we finally get our full introduction to Jerry Dandridge, played by the one and only Chris Sarandon. And, Jerry knows what Charlie has done. He's busted him, and he starts making all these little wisecracks, but at the same time, kind of being charming toward Mrs. Brewster. And then when he confronts Charlie about what happened, he's threatening to kill him. He goes, "You can let this go, or I have no other choice. I'm going to have to kill you." And as Charlie decides he's going to turn to go to the police with everything, basically, Jerry confronts him, and Charlie stabs Jerry in the hand with a wooden pencil, which causes him to show partly of his true form before escaping. So what happens is he goes to the cops, and we also meet Billy Cole, Jerry's supposed to be a roommate, but as we later learn, he's not exactly a roommate. He's actually something else. And he's played by the awesome Jonathan Stark. You might have seen him in films like House 2 and a few other great genre films of the decade of the 80s. So, of course, no one's believing him now. Evil Ed doesn't believe it. His girlfriend doesn't believe it. His mother doesn't believe it. The cops don't believe him. So Charlie has nowhere else to go. Charlie watches his favorite show, Fright Night, and sees Peter Vincent. And Peter Vincent is the host of this show, who played vampire hunters in these early cheesy vampire flicks. Now, Charlie's convinced that Peter might know a thing or two and could be the only one who believes him. So he decides to go to the studio where Peter was shooting Fright Night, only to find out that Peter had just gotten fired from the show. So what happens is he tries to convince Peter, and Peter doesn't believe a word of it. He thinks that Charlie needs some serious help. And Charlie's still out of fear. He's fearing that Jerry's going to come and get him. So he somehow convinces Ed and Amy to go meet Peter himself and try to convince him. But the truth is, they want to work together to give Charlie an intervention. Now, what happens next is outstanding crazy. So Peter comes up with a holy water gag, and they go to Jerry's house, and Jerry's pleasant towards everyone. He eyes Amy like he wants her, and with good reason. I'll explain that in a little bit. But Jerry passes the holy water test, much to Charlie's chagrin, but to everyone else's delight. They're like, okay, Charlie's crazy. But then when Peter opens his little mirror, Peter's now convinced, because another rule about vampires, you don't see the reflections in the mirror. And he does not see Jerry's reflection in the mirror. So now he's convinced, and he's scared shitless, basically, was what happens. So he wants to tell Charlie, but he's also afraid. Jerry discovers what had happened. So he starts going after everyone involved. Eventually, he gets to Evil Ed, and he convinces Evil Ed to join his Legion of Doom, as I'll call it. And Evil Ed gets bitten and transforms into a vampire. Now, at a nightclub, Jerry charms the pants out of Amy, much to Charlie's chagrin, and as Charlie tries to tell the bouncers what's going on, they confront Jerry, but Jerry, thanks to his vampirism, overpowers the two bodyguards and runs off with Amy. He kidnaps Amy. Tries to tell Peter what's going on. Peter is packing his bags. He just wants to get the hell out of Dodge, forget he ever saw anything. But Charlie somehow manages to convince him, listen, we have to team up together to get Amy back from Jerry. And this is right after Jerry calls Charlie and lets him know that show up with your buddy tonight or Amy's going to die. You'll never see her again. However, this is where things get interesting. Amy wakes up and she's in this dress, and Jerry informs her that she reminds him of a past love of his. So, using his wits and charm, Jerry seduces Amy and then proceeds to bite her on the neck. Now, Charlie and Peter show up to the house, and this is the part I love, because Chris Sarandon comes in, walking towards the balcony, from the upper space, coming from his room. He comes to the top of the staircase, and he says, "Welcome to Fright Night." And then he does and goes, "For real." So he knows that Charlie knows that he's a vampire. Now he knows that Peter knows that he's a vampire, and he tries to confront them. Now, Peter tries to whip out the cross. Problem is, for the cross to work, you have to have faith, and Peter's still scared so shitless that he's scared. I think Jerry's scared the living faith out of him. So that's what happens, and but Charlie ends up having the faith, and Jerry manages to escape. When Charlie discovers Amy, it's too late. Amy is transforming into a vampire. And Charlie starts screaming, and Jerry notices it, and he has this big shit-eating grin on his face. Meanwhile, Evil Ed gets to Peter, and Evil Ed reveals himself as a vampire, and Peter proceeds to confront him by putting a cross on his head, and Ed gets this big burn mark on his face, and he escapes. So after everything, Peter's finally decided, you know what? He's gonna have to help Charlie stop this guy once and for all. So they decide to team up together. And at first, they're worried that something's gonna happen with Charlie's mother. So Peter goes to Charlie's house, and finds Evil Ed wearing a fucking Raggedy Ann wig, pretending to be Mrs. Brewster. It turns out that Mrs. Brewster is working nights now, and this was mentioned in an earlier scene that she was like, "Start working nights tomorrow." And that might have skipped, for fans like, oh, did he kill her? No, he didn't, because she was working nights. So, but this was funny because when Evil Ed confronts Peter for the second time, he pulls out, oh, apparently she's working nights, and he left a note. And this part kills me the most because he takes the note out and he just goes, his dinner is in the oven. So then Peter gets scared shitless, and he crashes through a table. And then Ed takes a wolf form, leading to Peter having to end up stabbing him with one of the table legs through the heart. And so next, it's the big confrontation. It lasts long, but there's some nasty stuff that goes on with this particular scene. You got a guy melting like he came out of Street Trash or Slime City Massacre. You got Amy's almost full transformation, having the biggest freaking mouth I've ever seen in my entire life, and it's on the poster. If you ever see the poster for Fright Night, that is Amy's like fully transformed face on that poster, and that is total fucking nightmare fuel. I shit you not. But I had so much fun every time I watched this movie. I had so much fun. I used to watch it so much when I was younger because my grandmother actually had a copy of this movie, that she had recorded from HBO. We used to always record movies from HBO or some of our favorite channels back in the day when you had VHS, the blank VHS tapes. And I'm pretty sure I'm not the one who's ever done this. I think I still have some of mine, but sadly don't have my grandmother's Fright Night tape anymore, sadly. Um, but I do have it on DVD. It was part of a 4-movie set. I think it had Christine, The Blob, Fright Night, and there was one other movie I can't think off the top of my head. I think that's the one. But here is some fun facts about Fright Night. Fright Night was written and directed by Tom Holland. And no, we're not talking about the Spider-Man actor, ladies and gentlemen. This is a prolific genre filmmaker. He had written films like Class of 1984, Psycho 2, and Cloak and Dagger. It was during Cloak and Dagger that Holland decided he wanted to do a horror comedy of sorts about a horror movie fan who's convinced that his next door neighbor is a vampire. But that's as far as he went. He didn't know what he wanted to do because everyone's going to think he's crazy. So um, he was discussing it with the head of story development at Columbia Pictures, John Byers, and he finally decided, you know what? We need to get a guy who's like Vincent Price or get inspiration from these local horror TV show hosts like Zachary, Svengoolie, and of course Elvira. So all of a sudden he came up with Peter Vincent, whose name is based on 2 horror icons, Peter Cushing and Vincent Price. And of course, he's played by Roddy McDowall, who actually played one of the teachers in Class of 1984, who fell under the gang in that film. But that's one little piece of trivia that I want to talk about. And also, interesting enough, this was the same year that 2 of the film stars, Stephen Jeffries and Amanda Bierce, appeared in a second film together. Only this was a comedy called Paternity Vacation for New World Pictures. And this has an early appearance from Tim Robbins and starred another horror icon in her own right. Actually, 2 horror icons in their own right, but doing non-horror stuff. I'm talking about Catherine Kinmont and World Film Geek Hall of Famer and legendary icon Barbara Crampton. They have supporting roles in this film as well. And so they did that film together at one point. Um, Stephen Jeffries' role as Evil Ed is pretty interesting because originally Jeffries had auditioned for Weird Science to play Gary. Unfortunately, the audition worked out, but he impressed casting agent Jackie Birch, who did the casting for this film, and she suggested that he would play Evil Ed. But when he saw the script, he was hoping to get the role of Charlie, which eventually went to William Ragsdale. Ragsdale would go on to appear in the hit show Herman's Head, and I have to mention this because this is so underrated. Both Ragsdale and McDowell returned for a sequel in 1988, Fright Night Part 2, which involved Julie Carmen as Regina Dandridge, the sister of Jerry, and she uses her powers of seduction to get Charlie into a spell, all for the sake of revenge for her brother. So there's that, and this one adds a few more horror elements too, on comedy elements, excuse me, in the forms of two of her henchmen who are like werewolf-like creatures, and of course, bad shit happens to them. Unfortunately, Amanda Bierce didn't return for this one because I think she was doing Married with Children at the time. So instead, they replaced Amanda's Amy with Tracy Lynn's new character. Tracy Lynn would go on to star in Class of 1999, the spiritual sequel of Class of 1984, which involved now the teachers being the villains, and she plays the principal's daughter in this one. So that's a little bit of note to talk about. And of course, we have the 2011 remake, which stars Colin Farrell as Jerry Dandridge and the late great Anton Yelchin as Charlie Brewster. Christopher Mintz-Plasse, who played McLovin, would go on to play Evil Ed, and Imogen Poots would play Amy in this one. Now, instead of the horror show host, Peter Vincent is a Las Vegas magician played by the awesome David Tennant, who I felt, honestly, I was a little disappointed with the remake. I'm gonna be honest with you, but I felt like no one else could have played Peter Vincent other than David Tennant. As I was watching it, I couldn't see anyone else play it, and I felt like he helped that role. Colin Farrell did pretty good as Jerry Dandridge. He was okay, but I did like Chris Sarandon's obviously better because Chris Sarandon brought a specific more, how do I put this, joie de vivre to the role. So that's what I really liked. And interestingly enough, what's today, today's climate and all that. What's interesting is we now know that Stephen Jeffries and Amanda Bierce are also both LGBTQ community members, and I'm proud of them. I'm glad for all the stuff they did. Jeffries did say at one point during the 90s, he felt like he didn't know what to do with his career, and so he ended up doing adult films for a while, and he had to, I gotta respect him for that. He did what he had to do, overcame a lot, and I'm glad that he's back doing conventions now for Fright Night. Amanda Bierce would be freaking immortalized as Marcy Rhodes Darcy in Married with Children. I mean, her and Ed O'Neill's constant butting heads throughout the 11 seasons, that was like the funniest stuff you can ever see. And she has that really great comedic charm to that role, and she really brought that on. And I really liked that. And to see her to do the scared damsel in distress here in Fright Night is, just it shows how much of a range that she has in acting. So good for her. William Ragsdale, as mentioned, he would go on to star in Herman's Head, and he would do another sequel in Mannequin 2, replacing Andrew McCarthy, where Chrissy Swanson replaced Kim Cattrall as the new mannequin. And I have to admit, I have a soft spot for Mannequin 2. I love the Mannequin movies, and I know there's a lot of people who probably don't like the Mannequin movies, but I think they're probably still like the first one for Kim Cattrall, and I can't really blame you there. But I like the second one. The second one was pretty funny, and it helped that Terry Kaiser's um, Count Spretzel, he kind of like kept making me giggle in that film. And but back to Fright Night, I really love this movie. Definitely an '80s classic film, and if you haven't seen it yet, you can see it on any streaming service. It's on Tubi as of right now. Of course, I'm gonna keep bringing Tubi up in a lot of these episodes because this is where I'm seeing a lot of. This is where I see most of my stuff now. I watch it on Tubi because Tubi has such an amazing collection of older and newer films that are smaller scale and are geared towards audiences like myself and others who grew up watching these films. So yeah, definitely check it out on Tubi if you love a good vampire horror comedy, and this is definitely one of the best ones out there. And so that's going to be it for this, and I hope everyone has a kick-ass Halloween, because of course I'm not going to be doing another episode. The next episode is going to be on November 6th, as this is bi-weekly. So I wanted to do this as a special treat for everyone. I figured, let me just go A-list this one time. Try to do something that's not too kind of big, but also gained a hell of a following. So yeah, Fright Night definitely is one to check out. And next episode, we will on November 6th, we'll be talking about a 1979 comedy called Scavenger Hunt. And it's just the story of an eccentric game inventor who dies, and basically it's going to be a scavenger hunt to see who will get his $200 million estate. And of course, you got the greedy ones, you got the non-greedy ones, and you got all around chaos. And it has an ensemble cast, so we'll be talking about that on the next episode of the Video Store Geek Podcast. So yeah, so don't forget to check out worldfilmgeek.com for the latest in reviews, a couple of news now and then, and some interviews. We just did an interview with horror queen Sarah French for Brute 1976, as well as two of her co-stars, Jed Rowan and Bishop Stevens. You want go to worldfilmgeek.com right now to check those interviews out. And also check out our interview with Paul Bonnell on the YouTube channel, World Film Geek YouTube channel. And yeah, that's it. So I hope everyone has a great Halloween. And again, I hope you guys get to see Fright Night. If you haven't seen it yet, it's definitely high up there. It's an A in my book for this one. Although I'm trying to cover more smaller scale films, but I just wanted to do this as a Halloween treat for you all. So, all right, so I'm going to be signing off. This is your friendly neighborhood world film geek, Albert Valentin, and until next time, stay awesome.
Thank you for listening to the Video Store Geek Podcast. Don't forget to check out worldfilmgeek.com for the latest reviews, interviews, and news in the world of indie and global cinema. And see you on the next episode of the podcast. Stay awesome, film geeks.